Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. If you'd like to call us and join in with the teaching of the class today, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. If you'd like to listen on your telephone as throughout the day, 605-562-6564, 605-562-6564. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. Rich Scheben's on with us this morning in the front of the class. Welcome, Rich Scheben. Yeah? So where's Rich Scheben? Rich, are you there? Yeah. I don't know where Rich is. I got notification just before the broadcast started that Rich Scheben was with us, but let me do this while we're waiting for Rich Scheben to join us. You know, we might have had some technical difficulties. By the way, minus 5 degrees here in our neck of the woods in Missouri. And it was so cold that we brought a newborn calf into our garage. We've got some hay on the floor, and we made a little pen for him. Took a 16-foot cattle panel and made a semicircle against the garage door. And so our brand newborn calf has got some hay in there, and he's lying on the hay, and he's being bottle fed. That's one of the stories I want to tell you today. I want to talk about what's wrong with America. And Rich Scheben, the minute you hear my voice, feel free to join in. So here's a story about 3 different companies. On Sunday, we had a newborn calf, the one that's in the garage right now. And, of course, it was freezing cold out. Snow flurries, snow on the ground. Hey, Rich, how are you?
Hello?
Hey, Rich.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, what happened?
I have no idea. I was sitting on hold, and I heard everything you said. And you said, welcome, Rich Scheben. And I commented, and I had to hang up and call back. I don't know what happened.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm telling a story about this new calf that was born on Sunday, and I haven't really gotten into the story, but so let me continue with that. I'm glad you're with us, Rich. So on Sunday, the calf was born, and, you know, they start out at the mother's temperature, and they come out soaking wet, as you would expect a newborn to come out soaking wet. And they've got hair on them, and so think of it like you're washing your dog, you know, on a summer day, and he's soaking wet. Well, this calf comes out kind of like that. How big? About 100 pounds, about the size of a large German Shepherd. And the calf is weak and wobbly and really can't stand up. He's just experiencing breathing air for the first time, and it's freezing cold. So we took the calf away from his mother. She wasn't really happy about that, but it was so cold the calf would die because he was soaking wet. Put him in the pickup truck, brought him into the garage, dried him off, and the calf is doing fine. So immediately I called Orscheln. Orscheln is a farm and ranch kind of a store, and it was on Sunday. And I called and said, hi, I'm Vincent Finelli. I'm a regular customer. What time do you close? Well, we're closing now. Okay. Well, I need some colostrum. I've got a newborn calf, and the calf will die without colostrum within 24 hours. So the gal who answered the phone was really polite and nice and young gal. And she said, let me get the manager. The manager comes on. I explained the situation, who I was. I'm a regular customer. They know me. I'd need some colostrum. And she said, we're closing. And I said, yeah, I know, but can you just grab a bag and throw it out the front door, and I'll come pick it up and pay you tomorrow. I'll give you my name again, and you can write it down. She said, no, we're closing. I said, yeah, I know that, but my calf will die if I don't get this colostrum within 24 hours. And she said, no. I was absolutely stunned. I said, you can write my name down and just throw it out the front door. You don't have to ring it up. It's only like $25 worth of stuff, one little bag. And she said, no. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely stunned. So I know the manager. I know where he lives. I picked up the phone. I called him up. I said, hey, Carl, Vin Finelli. He said, hey. I said, here's what happened. He said, yeah, we don't do that anymore. Because people who we've done that for haven't paid their bills. They don't pay for it. They don't come back. And it was silence. Silence from my end of the phone, because I was thinking, okay, what's that got to do with me? Just because other people don't honor their commitments, what's that got to do with me? And he let me know, politely, but they're not going to do it. And they don't do it. Now that goes into my equation. Like, will I go back and spend my money there? Okay, this is one story. I'm going to tell you 3 stories about what's wrong with America. As soon as I can, today I'm going to call the CEO of Orscheln and say, here's what's going on. I'm just trying to figure out who your customers are and why you guys are in business. And if you don't want to take care of your customers, they're going to leave. And please give me a good reason why I should continue shopping at Orscheln. Okay, a real good reason. Because they really, I didn't know that the calf was going to deliver at that moment. Should I have had colostrum on hand? Yes, I should have. I should have. And I used the last amount of it. And it doesn't keep very long. So it's relatively expensive for what, when you look at the package, you say, wow, that's a lot for that little package. But from now on, absolutely, I will keep more. We do keep it, but what we had was out of date. So here's the next story. There's a husband and wife farm family just down the road from us. They're in their 80s. And this summer, we were asked if we could cut, rake, and bale their hay. And we said, sure, be glad to help you. And traditionally, the arrangement is this. The farmer or the landowner gets half the hay, and the person who does the work gets the other half. So the farmer really wasn't that all happy with the guy who did the hay for him previously, and he asked us, and I introduced our son to them, and I should say, mostly our son did the job, and it was done on time, it was done well, and they were really pleased. And there was one extra bale of the 50-50 split, and of course, we left that with them, because they get, we'll call it the big half. All right, so they got the extra bale, because there was an odd number of bales, and they were satisfied. Well, we got a call, the husband died, and we got a call from his wife a few days ago, and she said, hey, our truck has got no brakes. Can you help us? And I was on the phone. I said, sure. So I asked our son to go take a look, and he brought some brake fluid with him, and the reservoir was empty. He filled it up and brought it here, put it up on our lift, looked at it, and let her know about what it would take to replace the rusted out, broken brake lines. There were 2 of them, front one and the back one. And so he let her know, and my son called me out to the under the car, and he said, come, Dad, you got to see this. So I looked, and an oil filter was leaking. I've never seen that before. Leaking all around the oil filter, 360 degrees. So I said, I've never seen that before, but you ought to call the lady who owns this truck and let her know that, you're not looking for extra things to fix on this vehicle, but this is one thing that you got to take care of. And so he called her, and she said, yeah, she just got the oil changed. And the people who did it, the company that did it, did not have the oil filter for this 2004 Chevy V8, probably the most common Chevrolet oil filter on the planet. Okay? They didn't have the one to fit it, so they put the old one back on. They didn't oil change and put the old filter with the old dirty oil back on. Now, what would that filter have on it? In it. It would have the dirtiest, most contaminated oil available in the oiling system of that engine. Would be in that oil filter. And that's what they put back on. Next story. My mouth is just, I'm speechless. I've never heard of having someone change the oil filter, take off the old oil filter, go, you know what? We don't have one like this. So we'll put the old one back on. We're not going to get a new one. Now, class, bear in mind, if you wanted to get an oil filter for this car, you go to any auto parts store, anyone. They'd have it. Or you can go to Walmart, and they would have it. Walmart. They would have this oil filter. As a matter of fact, they'd have it in 2 brands, AC Delco and Fram, at least in any Walmart. Next story. So I decided to move the studio from upstairs in our farmhouse to downstairs. There are a lot of reasons. One, there are more windows. I've got 3 windows in the studio right now, and there's more light. So instead of facing north, I'll face south. And I kind of like that idea. I'm going to convert our dining room into a studio. And I needed 2 doors, and I wanted glass doors, like French-style doors. One of them is 4 feet wide, and the other is 3 feet wide. So I called Menards, and I got a price, and they had a 11% off sale. And what happens with Menards is you get 11%, but that 11% comes back to you in a rebate. You got to spend it another time. You just don't get cash off. So I got their price, and I got the price from the company that sold us all the building materials for our house. And the price from the building material that I normally deal with was a little bit higher. I said, okay, let's get it from you. So I ordered the doors on Friday. On Monday, just before the broadcast, I got a call from the store manager saying, price is not exactly, it's changed. Actually, it's higher. And it's about $100 higher. And I said, what? How's that possible? And he said, well, the company that quoted the doors, the manufacturer, made a mistake. And it's more expensive. I said, well, just call them and tell them they made a mistake and have them eat the mistake. It's their mistake. No, I don't do that. Well, I'm going to tell you the rest of that story when we come back. And it's probably not what you think. Rich Shealy and I'll be right back. And the rant won't go on too much longer. Just for another couple minutes. Rich Shealy's with us. Offgridmontana.com. Offgridmontana.com. So, I had this pricing change on an order that I made, and there was an agreement on the phone as to the price and delivery, and I agreed, and the store agreed, and everything was settled, but I got a call that, the price was going to go up. And I wasn't happy with that. So I got this call just before the broadcast started on Monday, and I said, I'm going on the air in a few minutes. I'll tell you what, how about you call the store? I'm sorry, you call the factory, let them know what happened, and I'm sure that, ask for the manager, and I'm sure that they'll make good on this. And can you call me back, please, at 11 o'clock when I get off the air? So the store manager, Russell, called me just after 11 o'clock, and he said that he talked to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer, and they couldn't figure out who he talked to when he placed the order, and they were not going to adjust the price. I was kind of stunned. I thought, this isn't going to work. So now I'm faced with a couple things. Do I say, you know what? When I make a mistake, I eat the mistake. I don't go back to my customer and say, you know what? Got bad news. I'm going to charge you more than you agreed to pay and that I agreed to sell it to you for. I just eat it. That's just the way I am. Well, he told me that the manufacturer couldn't figure out who he talked with, and they couldn't help him. I said, well, I'll tell you what, Russell, let me have the number that you called to order these doors, and I'll call him. Russell was a little bit reluctant to let me know his source and give me the phone number. I said, look, I'm not going to ask him the price. I just want to talk to him and have this fixed. He gave me the phone number, and I called it, and I asked for the CEO, the president, and I got transferred immediately. The manufacturer was extremely polite, well-behaved, couldn't be nicer. And I got transferred to the president's phone line, and I got his voicemail. And it said, we want the message said I could return to the operator. So I pressed 0, return to the operator, and explained that what the situation was. And I said, who else can help me? Like now. And so she transferred me to a gentleman by the name of Kirk. And I got his voicemail, left him a message, and I said, maybe we can work this out before I talk to the president. He called me, and we talked. Called me back, and we talked. And we're on the phone. Kirk and I were on the phone that day for about an hour. And we see eye to eye on so many things. And I explained what happened. And he said he'd look into it. And ultimately, he called me back same day. And he said, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. And you're going to end up paying what you originally agreed to pay for these doors. I'm happy. He's happy. And the company that sold me the doors is happy. So here are three companies. Only one of them, in my opinion, got it right, and that's the company that manufactured the doors. But what's happening, in my opinion, is there are cheats out there, customers who try to cheat the businesses, and the businesses are trying to protect themselves, but it looks like everybody is paying for what these cheats do. So there's a reluctance on the part of an Orscheln to help save a calf. Now, to me, that's life or death, and it's inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. But Orscheln won't help us in those situations. Now, another side of that coin is there's a company, a little cooperative that is closed on Sunday, and every day I go past there, I will see bags that are stapled with a receipt on top, or bags of feed with a receipt taped to the bags. And I'll see customer after customer after customer's orders that have been phoned in and placed on the front sidewalk 20 feet from the road where everybody just travels by in our little hamlet. And that's where the customer's supplies are placed. It's the honor system. And it works. It works. No one is going to steal someone else's grain. No one is going to steal someone else's medicines for their animals. No one's going to steal someone else's fence wire, fence insulation, or posts, or whatever it is. No one. So I'm kind of frosted with Orscheln. Actually, I'm really frosted with Orscheln. And I'm going to call the CEO today. I'm frosted with the guy who changed that oil and put the old filter back on. It's inexcusable to do that to an 80-year-old woman. Inexcusable. And I'm delighted with Mid-Am Building Supply, the door company. Class, the first and second segment are about what's wrong with America, three companies. And just want to let you know that there's a real positive thing that's happened from this. Mid-American Building Supply, the company that provided the doors, not the store, but the company that provided the doors. The gentleman I talked with, Kirk, is considering becoming a USA Preparedness instructor. We agree on so many things. And if he joins the faculty, it will be a really good thing for us, for all of us, because he's got a wealth of information to share, including what we need to do to fix this country. Rich Scheben, do you have any comments on that rant of three companies and what's wrong with America?
Well, what rant, Vince? I hardly noticed. Well, I can go into many directions here. It's some examples there of common sense that's gone stupid. There's some examples there of we don't hire in America anymore by hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications regarding the employee, some of them you mentioned. We have to hire now by group. And we also have a situation where when you have a debt-based currency, when you have credit collapsing, yield curves getting ready to invert, which is an obvious example of credits collapsing, you have corporations that have hit their highest debt level in the U.S. GDP since 2008. Just the last 2 years alone, corporations issued $1 trillion in new debt. And it's not for expansion, new products or services, and especially not for people or employees. It's to boost their earnings per share and create more debt and share buybacks, dividends, and executive cash in the forms of stock options. It's basically the fleecing by corporate America of the American people. And, the acquisitions, the mergers, everything is for the benefit of corporate America and the hierarchy or the executives, and not for the people, the employees, or the customers anymore. And we've talked about this in great length over just the last few weeks. So, margin debt's an all-time high. We have high corporate, household, and government debt. We have pensions in the red. And this is why a lot of these corporations are doing this, because they see the writing on the wall. Everybody's trying to save their job, especially in mid-level management, while the people in upper-level management are cashing in. And it's a giant, it's a toilet bowl. It's just a funnel, and it just keeps going down. So with the advent of what the people who have foresight can see what's happening with robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, and the technocracy to be, people are realizing that they're not going to have their jobs. And we are in a deflationary spiral with stagflationary complications for the bottom 93%. And everything is a hedge or speculation right now regarding the future. And we talk about this all the time. Demographics, central bank corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, and group identity politics have literally destroyed America and degraded and disrespected their people, especially if they're associated with some type of group or hyphen. And when you lower the bars of standards and expectations, as we have, we've literally destroyed America via rewarding mediocrity. And then everything that made us good, the ingenuity, the productivity, the innovation, the knowledge, the work ethic, the high standards, everything's gone. And everybody is scrambling for the last buck. And we're at that last stage right now. We have rounded third base, and we're trying to run over home plate as the umpire is digging up the plate out of the ground. So that's the situation that we're in. And, at the same time, I don't blame some of these companies. I cannot go into a gas station anymore where if you're going to pay cash, that you can actually get gas without prepaying, because so many of the people have scammed the system, filled up their vehicles, and driven away and didn't pay. Most of it on purpose. I'm sure a few by accident, but most of it on purpose. And now if you pay cash, unless you use a credit or debit card, you have to pay in advance. So I don't blame the companies for having that philosophy, because everybody has backstabbed one another and has ruined the credit situation. What I would like to see companies do is give certain benefits to people who pay their bills on time. Kind of like a credit card company. You'll pay the interest if you pay your bill. And if the companies did that, and there was a certain type of credit for people who paid their bills, and even then it's very ambiguous, because you look at the healthcare system, which is the reason why prices are so high in the stagflation. Everybody says healthcare is inflationary, and you could buy that to some degree, but the reason why it's inflationary, a lot of these areas, because of subsidies, money printing, special interests, lobbying, PACs, etc. So why is health insurance so expensive? Well, one of the reasons people don't pay their bills is because the hospitals and the clinics, they're not controlled by the doctors anymore. They're not controlled by the good people. They're controlled by the oligarchy. And they double bill, they triple bill, they quadruple bill, and this is the situation we're in. So the corporations, the big corporate oligarchies, as well as small and medium-sized companies, they're either taking advantage of the people or they're trying to protect each other. Now, we live in a fascist state where 4 to 6% of people are actually making their primary income from being self-employed. That means our employees are the big corporate oligarchies and big government, which have created an alliance, protected by the mainstream media and the court system. The whole game is rigged, and this is why people...
Go ahead. You mentioned something. I just wanted to comment on it. Give a reward for people who pay their bills. Class, there's a term, if you have an account with a company, it's read like this: the number 2 / the number 10 space the letter N / 30, and it's pronounced 210 net 30. 210 net 30. And what that means is when you receive your statement, the monthly statement from that company where you have an account. 210 net 30 means you get 2% off if you pay the bill within 10 days. If you don't pay the bill within 10 days, the entire bill is due in 30 days. The net is due in 30 days. So 210 net 30 means 2% off if you pay within 10 days of receiving the bill. The balance, the whole bill is due in 30 days. So what we do is we take that reward for paying the bill on time. We take the 2% off. And it's great. And it's easy. And it works. And everybody understands it. And everybody's happy. The company that sells you the products is happy because they get their payment right away. They like it. They don't have to call you. They don't have to say, "Hey, I know you want to pay us. By the way, did you get the statement? Oh, we need to send you another one. Oh, I see." I mean, they don't want to harass their customers to get them to pay. So a nice incentive is the 210 net 30, and we take advantage of it 100% of the time. So you're right.
We've lost our business model in too many areas. I guess one analogy would be off the top of my head. Back in the good old days, people used to buy a new vehicle. Well, now the car companies are more dependent on long-term cash flow that's priced in via leasing vehicles, and it's just an example of everybody who's looking for yield, looking for long-term payments to come in. Well, we're in an everything collapse mode or close to it, where the credit cycle is literally falling apart. And the powers that be are doing everything through artificial bubbles. I think of that word, artificial bubbles, to keep stocks, bonds, housing, all real estate, especially commercial and retail, emerging markets. We got to pay the interest in our debt. How the heck? We have to spend 4 times as much in money printing to create 25% of GDP growth. And this is why I always say that increased GDP is not associated with happiness for the bottom 93%. The bottom 93% needs a healthy savings account and to be out of debt. So that being said, the whole system is teetering on the edge of a cliff. It's a lose-lose outcome for the bottom 93%. And this is one of the reasons why we always talk about things like self-sufficiency. And you always hear me talk about, look what's happening with the cryptocurrencies right now. This is why I always say never go above 10% in anything. I always try to have a bird in the hand philosophy versus 2 in the bush. Because we don't know when the elite are going to crash the system and what direction it's going to go. And that's why we have to have all these different directions. From debt-free, a little silver, gold, a little cash, a little U.S. treasuries, a little cryptocurrencies. But we have to have skill sets. And we have to go back to the old 19th century skill sets that we've forgotten. And think for yourself. Raising animals, growing a garden, food preservation, edible medicinal plants, hunting and fishing, buying land and your rural property. We can talk about ideas and solutions all day. But for the little guy, we have to be diversified in so many different areas so we're not taken advantage of by the system, whether it be by the small and medium-sized companies doing everything to survive, or the big corporate oligarchies doing everything to fleece the American people. Vince?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. March 8th and 9th, there's bringing back the American Small Farm, the Ozark Farmers Agricultural Cooperative. It's going to be hosting a 2-day regional conference, bringing back the American Small Farm. And it's americansmallfarm.com if you want to find out more about it. I'll be there. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Truck driver Jay in Montana. Welcome, Truck driver Jay.
Good morning, Vincent. Good morning, Rich. I looked at your good morning. I looked at your website. Very impressed. You have a very beautiful house and beautiful pictures of the game and fish that you caught. Very nice website. Want to know, how much of the game meat and fish do you store, or are you willing to sell some? and how much electricity are you able to produce and store for your house?
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Give you a few questions here. So, first of all, it is illegal, Jay, to sell wild game. So,
okay.
But I do make a point, and this is in the book, and I've done this for years and years and years. I make a point to give away 50% of the meat that I harvest. That's just something that I've done as a community service to people who appreciate the meat. And, people appreciate low cholesterol, no steroids, hormones, or antibiotics, and lean meat. So it's always been worthwhile for me and for the recipient of whoever I give the free meat to. Now, my electricity, I live kind of rugged. I live with an Amish-made wood-cook stove. The log cabin that you see on my website is just a shell. I have no rooms. It's basically like an open hunting lodge, if you will. And that's the look that I went for. So what I do, I live without interior pipes, traditional interior pipes. I live without hot water heater and pressure tank. And I choose to live rugged because I love nature, and it keeps me humble. And I like to move around. I like to have a few chores that aren't hard to do, but that keep me moving, because motion is lotion when you get older. And my system is a very small system. It's a 675 amp-hour system, if you're familiar with off-grid living. And basically, we have lights. We have a refrigerator that sits in the basement, one of those sun frosts that's with the compressors on the top so the heat doesn't dissipate through the box. And we only turn it on during the summer months. And during the winter months, we leave our food on the basement floor by the French doors, and it stays a regular 30 to 40 degrees all winter long. So we don't fight the seasons. We love seasonality because of the benefits it offers. So we take advantage of seasonality for those purposes. So we have lights, we have that refrigerator, we have a couple of computers, and that's pretty much it. And, because we don't have a hot water heater and a pressure tank and fancy, we have a coffee maker, and when we wash the little dog, we'll, break out the blow dryer. But most of how we live is very rugged, and it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Okay. Well, my wife and I live way out in the boonies, like you do, like Vince does, and we like to go off-grid, especially with electricity. And we're in the double wide, and I'm trying to figure out how to get a big battery in there and where to store it at, and want some tips.
I've got some comments. Rich, do you have some comments?
I do. I'm going to give you some information here, Jay.
Okay.
And I'm going to have to give you the majority of it after this break. But besides lead acid, which I use deep cycle lead acid, I'm going to tell you about a few other newer batteries to look into. And I'll give you as many tips as I can after the break, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, hold the line, Jay, please. Richie and I'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Sheben's with us. Offgridmontana.com. Offgridmontana.com. Truck driver Jay's with us. He is calling in from Montana. The question was about battery banks for solar arrays, keeping them inside. A lot of concerns here, Jay. Rich, why don't you go first?
Yeah, you bet. First of all, as far as keeping him inside, it all depends. You are going to have some discharge from lead acid batteries, and that's always an issue. I recommend that if you did have batteries for an off-grid system, you'd have them outside in a shed or in a basement where there might be a little bit of venting, or have a small room to the side where you can open up a window. Now, you want to use deep cycle in lieu of shallow cycle lead-acid batteries. Now, the smaller the system, in other words, the more rugged you're willing to live, Jay, is going to be a lot easier. Because here in Montana, at least in western Montana, we have cloudy skies in the winter. So when you have a small system with lead-acid batteries, you have to fill them up every 7 to 8 days to full or almost full, as per your trimeter. So if you have a small system, it's a lot easier to fill up a cup than a gallon. So you want to keep that in mind, because when you don't fill up your system on a weekly or 7 to 8 day basis, you're going to lose the strength and capacity of those batteries. Now, there's a new battery that's been out for about a year, and I have a neighbor who has this. It's called silicon salt. Silicon salt. It's a sealed battery, no maintenance, 1.5 times longer shelf life, so they say, and it's good to minus 40 degrees below zero, so you can obviously put it outside. And the fact that there's no maintenance is a big deal. With lead-acid deep-cycle batteries, I check my electrolytes about every month or two. I have to equalize my batteries every month or two. It's not a big deal, but it adds up. And there's a new battery now called a Fisker battery. I read about this. And it's made for electronic vehicles. But if they have, so it's probably shallow cycle-ish, but if they have the capacity to make a deep cycle-ish Fisker battery, they're touting 500 miles per charge, less than 1 minute to charge on some instances. And this is supposed to make Elon Musk's film lithium batteries obsolete. It's known as a solid-state battery. And, again, if they create a deep cycle or have a deep cycle for this, it could change off-grid living. And I really believe that this year, in 2018, we're going to have new technologies, and not just the cryptocurrencies, but there's flying cars that's supposed to come out. There's a new product called Track and Go that you can put like a track on your individual tire, whether it be your pickup truck or an individual ATV or UTV, and go on snow. You don't even need plows anymore. I think there's going to be a lot of new innovations regarding technology. It's going to make outdoor living, off-grid living, a lot simpler. So just something to think about. But what I would do is, besides going on the Internet, Jay, I'd go to a battery store and talk to these people. Right. There's people who hang out there who actually set up for off-grid living and then consult with them. And it's worth the money to pay somebody to set you up so you do it right, so you get this, you make sure you have the right size breakers, the right size wire, so your wire doesn't get overheated. And now the technology has changed so much. I've been off-grid living for 11 years, and I cannot believe how many things I have that's obsolete, and it could even be the deep cycle lead-acid batteries. So things have changed dramatically, where you can even pull up water with your inverter charger if you get a 220-volt system. So There's been a lot of changes for the better, and I would look into all these things I mentioned and more. But go to a battery store, and I'll guarantee you that there's somebody there who goes there on a regular basis that buys batteries for off-grid occupancy, and these people are consultants, and they're usually electricians. And a lot of these guys even live off-grid. So you're really getting it from the horse's mouth, and that's what I would do.
Hey, can you touch on what the difference is between deep cycle and shallow cycle?
Well, a shallow cycle is what you have in your car. A shallow cycle basically gives you a high amount of amps to start that engine. A deep cycle is going to give you a moderate amount of amps that's going to last longer. And that's what you want when you live off-grid. So, but keep in mind, the more rugged you can live and the smaller your system. Now, where you're going to be in eastern Montana is going to make a big difference. The further east you go, usually has higher winds and more sun. So you might have, different options. And if you have the ability to do wind, look into it. If you have the ability to do hydro, that's extremely efficient. So look into different systems. It's not always solar, but solar panels have come a long way as far as size and expense, too.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments for you, Jay. Jay, did that help you?
Yes, it did. Very much.
All right. I've got a couple comments I'd like to add to what Rich said. If you decide to go with a lead-acid battery, they're less expensive in the short run, and they have a lower life in the long run. So you can get into them relatively inexpensively in the scheme of things. You could even buy them at the Chinese factory outlet. You can buy your deep cycle battery bank batteries at the Chinese factory outlet Walmart, and they'll work okay for several years, but they're not a lifetime battery. And of course they will require that you check the electrolyte, meaning you will have to pop open the caps and look and see what the electrolyte level is, and you'll top it off with distilled water. It has to be distilled water without impurities. Okay, so that's something that is a given. Now, in terms of off-gassing, you will find that lead-acid batteries will, when they're charging, they will off-gas. And it's explosive. The gas is corrosive, and it's explosive. So everybody that builds these systems recommends ventilation for the battery bank. And I went to the internet to see what other people are doing, and just about everybody does the same thing. They build a box, and the box can be made out of plywood. Then they insulate the box with the foam insulation. You can buy foam boards, 4x8 sheets, a half-inch thick, 3/4 an inch thick,
right.
And you can insulate the top and bottom and sides. And the idea is you want to keep the batteries from freezing. Now, lead-acid batteries, when they're in a state of discharge, are more likely to freeze than when they're fully charged. Okay, so the idea for me, if I had lead-acid batteries, I'd want them outside. I've experienced personally 2 explosions of lead-acid batteries in the studio here. I was out of the studio, but it sounded like an explosion would sound, boom, and there was acid all over the studio. I had to mop it up, clean it up, and I had to neutralize it with baking soda. It's not something that you want to experience. And I had it in a battery box, and it still exploded. It was a ventilated battery box, but it wasn't power ventilated, meaning air was not forced in. It was with convection. And if you go to the internet and you look up, a battery explosion, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I was not the first guy to experience this. But I'm a slow learner, and it took 2 explosions separately for me to figure out exactly what happened. I would not want to put batteries of any kind in an area where I'm staying without massive amount of ventilation. Now, there's 2 kinds of ventilation that people use according to the internet. One is push and the other is pull. So one is you'd have this battery box with an air inlet, like you drill a 2-inch hole at the bottom of the battery box and you put a screen on it so critters don't get in there. And then you have a 2-inch hole near the top of the box, and you can either push air in through the bottom, or you can have your fan on the top and pull the air out. Now, the problem is if you have an electric motor with brushes, there are sparks. I don't want sparks anywhere near battery fumes. Okay, that's a concern. So that's not what I'm doing.
That makes sense.
What I'm doing, well, I mean, you've seen the Hindenburg and the picture of the image of the Hindenburg light on fire. It was massive fireball. Okay, that's hydrogen. That's what's produced with lead-acid batteries, hydrogen gas. So what I have a different kind of a battery bank, and mine, I'm building this right now. I'm building what's called a manifold. And a manifold is a piece, in my world, it's a piece of 2-inch PVC pipe, and I have lots of little hoses, flexible plastic hoses that fit into the vent cap on the battery cap, into the vent hole in the battery cap. So the gases come out of the battery cap, go into this little plastic hose, go into a big pipe that's ventilated outside. That's my method. Now, is it the best? I don't know. I haven't proven it so that I can say it really, really works. But that's my idea. I like it better in the short run and the long run. But please don't do this and blame me if you have an explosion. I'm still prototyping and I'm still testing it. So, that's my thought. But you've got to ventilate these outside. You don't want to put them in the garage where you have animals. And Rich and Kyle, both had sheds outside, insulated sheds where the batteries are outside and there's plenty of ventilation. You do not want to breathe these fumes.
Right.
And Jay, I'll tell you, what you're doing is so smart, because let me just give you a little financial math here real quick. My whole system cost me $15,000. Everything. I mean, everything. The generator, the trimeter, the DC disconnect, the solar charger, the inverter charger, the panels, I mean, you name it, $15,000. If I was to bring electricity down my driveway, when I looked into this 12 years ago, it would have been $40,000. It's probably double that now. So living off grid, if you can buy land that does not have electricity to it, you're not only gaining on skill sets, but you're saving a ton of money.
Right.
Yeah, and
I still got more questions.
in the northern hemisphere, you want to be able to see south. You want to be able to see south in order to make this work. All right. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Truck driver Jay's with us. Kyle in Montana is on hold. Truck driver Jay, we're going to have to go quickly.
Okay. Just a quick question. You had talked about regular water versus distilled water. My wife and I, we have the big Berkey water filter. Is that the same as distilled water?
No. Distilled.
But
what
you can
happens
buy
with
distillers.
you can buy a distiller. You can make a distiller. If you were to take a tea kettle and put it on the stove, and the steam and water vapor that comes out, you could collect that, and that is distilled water. Okay. Distilled water leaves behind all the properties, all anything heavier than water is left in the kettle. That's what you have to use in a battery if you are going to top off the electrolyte, like as in a lead-acid battery. Jay, you can call back another time, and we'll be glad to talk some more, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
Jay.
Kyle in Montana. You know, during the break, I was thinking I was going to mention something, and I'm sure Kyle would have a comment, and here he is. Kyle, welcome.
Well, I was going to call in today anyway and wish my buddy Rich a happy day, good day, and you too, Vince. But I hope Jay is still listening, because I had some ideas for him, some things to think about. Number one, I want to commend him on really starting to think that way and get, kind of get with the program and try to do it as soon as you possibly can. But do a lot of reading, do a lot of studying, like Rich suggested there. I can't emphasize that enough. But don't let it bog you down. The best thing to do is, like Rich said, talk to some guys, do some research on the internet, but do something. And I really wanted to tell him, look on Craigslist. I bought my system, which is over 1,100 amp hours, with the breakers, with everything I needed except solar panels, off of a 6-month-old system. A guy was just upgrading to a huge system. I bought the whole entire thing for $5,000.
Wow.
And I already had my generator set up, but the key to this whole thing, Jay, is truly read and study and talk to people, but don't let it slow you down too much. Move. Do as much as you can as soon as you can, because I think we're being, just like the 1929 fervor of all the fun and everything that was going on in the 20s and stuff like that. I think we're being set up exactly the same way.
I agree.
Kyle, I've got a question for you. I tried to emphasize how important battery ventilation is for safety reasons. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Well, I do agree with you, Vince. I will tell you this, and I'm not trying to minimize this at all. You do not want to breathe those those sulfuric acid fumes. Okay, so building a box, I like the box idea with a vent system set up off of your there's a little inline motor that goes in there, and you can hook them up and set it up for your charge controller, and it will actually fire it up when it's charging. It'll fire this little motor out and suck the air out of the house. I will say this, though, Jay, in case Jay is still listening, or anybody else, actually, the amount, unless the batteries are really low and you're charging them with your system really hot and heavy, the amount of off-gassing that does come out of that is one of these things that it's a very small amount. Let me put it that way. The best way to do it, though, is always vent that stuff out. You don't want to. We got enough toxins in our environment. You know, you do not. You don't need any more. You know, so there ain't no use adding to the strain on your system, on your body.
You had, I believe, you had a shed with your battery bank in the shed and had ventilation built into the shed. Is that correct?
Actually, what I had, Vince. You want me to wait till after the break on this?
Yes. And I'd like Rich to comment on his. And, you know, there are lots of different ways of skinning this cat. But you got to get it right. And if you overcharge your batteries, you can damage them. If you let them freeze, you can damage them. If you don't put enough electrolyte in them, you can damage them. And what are we talking about? Thousands of dollars, maybe $10,000 sometimes. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us. Kyle in Montana's with us, both USA preparedness instructors. We're talking about off-grid power generation right now, battery banks and so forth. Kyle, you had some comments?
Yeah, I was going to mention to everyone listening there that, Jay, I've got a double wide. I lived in a double wide, and we lived off-grid for 13 and a half years. And then I'm in a double wide now, but we have a basement. And so I put all my batteries and everything in the basement. I know when I lived off-grid for the 13 and a half years, what I did on my double wide is I put it was a 24 by 56 double wide, and I put a 12-foot by 56-foot addition onto the side of it, and I insulated it R30 on the ceiling and the floors, and R19 on the walls, and part of that addition was a water/battery room, and it had all of my inverter and everything in a separate room. I had an extra 550-gallon water tank, and what I would do is when it was sunny out, I would run water from my well pump in the well into this 550-gallon tank, and then I had another well pump that was hooked up to the battery bank, and it would kick on and off. It would go to my pressure tank inside this water battery room, and that way I would keep everything ventilated. I would keep it separate from kind of the house, and it would still stay warm enough that I didn't take any chance on water freezing or batteries freezing or anything like that. The other thing he's really going to want to do is look into LED lights and every kind of energy-saving device you can, because the less amount of amps that you pull as a household, the smaller the system you'll have to buy. But just realize, like Rich said, it's more work. You know, he's got an absolutely gorgeous place. I love Rich's place. And he's got a very good setup for him and his wife. It worked out real well.
Rich, you have any comments?
Well, thanks, Kyle, for the nice, kind words. And, we do live a little more rugged, I got to admit, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. And that's one of the reasons I told Jay about those silicon salt batteries, because they're good to minus 40 degrees below zero. There's a lot less maintenance. In fact, pretty much no maintenance. They're a little pricier. But you're supposed to get 1.5 times the shelf life out of them. Now, with one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, part of the maintenance process is diligence with deep cycle batteries, lead-acid batteries. And that is that, for example, I really recommend you don't go below 80% of capacity or go below 20%. So what I do is I take my 675 amp hours, I multiply it times 0.20, and that gives me a total of 135 amps. So when I look at my trimeter, I try not to go too often above 135 amp use of my system. And that's going to keep your battery capacity and shelf life a lot longer. So with the new batteries like those silicon salts, you have certain, I know people who have them, and they love them, and they don't have to go every 7 or 8 days and fill it up to almost full. They don't have to keep an eye on their amp hours. They don't have to worry about distilled water and electrolytes. They don't have to worry about equalizing. So again, in the 11 years that I've been off-grid, the technology has changed so much. And, who knows? I'm just surprised that all my stuff is working as long as it has. And it's going to take probably a lot longer for me to take advantage of that technology. But I don't mind living the way I do. But if you can afford to buy acreage, folks, and especially find it without electricity and live your way instead of buying somebody else's problems, you're not going to have a smart meter. You're not going to have high monthly bills. The health consequences that go with it, it's just the benefits are astounding. So I really recommend it. Vince?
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. I just want to make a comment. During the top of the hour break, I ran down to take a look at the inverter and the charge controller. And we have two charge controllers charging our battery banks. We have two solar arrays. One's on the roof and of the barn, and the other is on the ground. And yesterday it was snowing, and we just took one of those push brooms, and we reached up as high as we could. The array is about 13 feet in the air. We could reach maybe 2/3, 3/4 of that, and then just easily brushed the snow downward and cleared off the array. So that array is working fine, even though the top part of it's covered with snow. The snow on the barn roof is still there, and we're getting zero power generation out of it. So what I wanted to share, something that Kyle and I talked about on the air before, probably you too, Rich, is the location of the solar panels. And I believe Kyle likes them on the ground. I like them on the ground because you can get to them and service them, and you can brush the darn snow off them. Because I can wait till that snow melts on the panels on the roof, but it's probably going to be a week. So if that's all we had, we'd be without electricity for a week. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree, Vince. I put mine so that I can pull it off. The way I designed my solar panels, and I've got 6 of them that are approximately 30, I think they're like 31 or 2 inches wide by 52 inches long, something like that. They're not 2 foot by 4 foot. But anyway, I put them up there so that when I pull the snow off of them, it drops right into my driveway, and so, or part of the driveway. I mean, it's not one that I have to drive on all the time, but I can swing my plow truck by there with the blade and just scoop that stuff and pile it up in a big pile out there where I put all the snow. I want to be able to reach the top of my solar panels with a broom. And that's exactly what you do. I had some on the roof at the other place, but I decided I'm not going down that road anymore because it's too much of a pain and too hard to fiddle with to have to get up there and get the snow off of them. So anyway, that's what I did. Sometimes you got ice build up on your house when you have that, because if it melts, those solar panels, if you get one little bitty tiny corner or edge of it that's dark, the snow comes off of it, boy, that little bugger heats up fast, and your panel will start melting that off in a hurry, and then you'll end up with large ice dams if it's on top of a house, or ice sickles hanging off your barn, but it doesn't really hurt a barn, but it can on your house.
Yeah, so a good point, class, is if you're thinking about doing it, you might want to consider what Kyle did and what Bruce K. and I. And Rich, are yours on the roof of your shed? Ours are on the ground.
I have both. I have about a total of 1,400 watts right now in solar panels, and the majority of them are on a pedestal up on a hill facing south, and I tilt them so they're almost horizontal. At this time of year, I can get away with it, so the snow barely sticks on it. Now, the other panels I have on the shed, they're really not too useful right now. In about another 2-3 weeks, I'm going to be getting a lot more power from them. So I'm more indifferent to those during the heart of the winter. So that's kind of my philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what our class is hearing is, depending on what we've got already built, our lifestyles, the terrain, and how much work we're willing to do, that all goes into the equation of where we're going to put the panels. So those people that you see who live in cold climates and have the solar panels on the roof, they're not going to get much electricity when there's snow on the panels, if they'll get any at all. And when you go to service them, it's up on the roof. And class, just think about this. Just think about what it would be like trying to lift 80 pounds. That's how much ours weigh, about 80 pounds apiece. And they're a little wider than 3 feet and a little longer than or taller than 6 feet. So think about what that would be like trying to manhandle that on the roof when the wind gusts. It'll take you and the solar panel off the roof.
Yep.
Seriously.
That's absolutely true. You know, people don't realize that, you know, that thing is a big wing. If you're setting up there and if you get very much wind, I built sort of like you did, Vince, when I lived out on the other place. I welded up and built and bolted together a large an array on top of my roof, thinking that was the best idea. Mm-hmm. And I built it out of that unistrut, and I welded it and bolted it together so it was strong as fire, because we'd get winds out there that'd be 40, 50 miles an hour, because it would come off of the mountain slopes where we were. And I didn't want them things blowing off, and they never did. But I told my wife before, if I had it all to do over again, I would have never put them on the roof. It's just too much of a pain. Put things down so you can think in terms of when you're 60 or 70 years old, and you want to live this lifestyle. That's fine. That's great. But think in terms of building things so that you and your wife, I'd include her as much as possible on how things work, because nobody's guaranteed tomorrow, you know. Put them all down here so it's as easy to get to that you can think what it'd be like if your grandparents were trying to do it, because you're going to be there someday.
Very, very good point. And there is some maintenance that goes with this. And if you're talking about lead-acid batteries, and if you're talking about nickel iron, you know, you've got this distilled water issue. And I don't know about the lead-acid consumption of distilled water, but I can tell you that I keep 12 gallons of distilled water on hand, because I know I'm going to use 10 gallons every 2 months. It's an enormous amount of loss of distilled water from these cells. And that's because I have to charge these batteries hard in order to break them in. That's what nickel-iron batteries like. And I'm going to be able to back down a little bit as soon as I get them all working properly. But, you know, the lead-acid batteries, well, a great feature is you fire them up the first time and they work great. The nickel-iron, not quite the case. You've got to finesse them. You've got to threaten them with overcharge just to get them to work right. It's not as easy as one might think. Because I mentioned that I was thinking about Kyle during one of the breaks, and I was going to ask him a question. Let me ask you this question, Kyle, and then let's get into any changes that we would make to our solar systems, Rich and Kyle. But here's the question. Kyle, have you ever heard of anybody doing this? So we have multiple computers in our farmhouse. I've got the studio, and we've got the kitchen computer, and we've got one in another area. And then we have our modem and that kind of thing. And I want to make sure that we have good, clean power to them all the time. So what I've done is, I'm not done with this, but I'm adding another circuit in the house, which is just for UPS. So, for example, I have a red outlet. All the other ones are either are tan or ivory. But I've got these red outlets that indicate they're for a special use, and I'm wiring them all back to uninterruptible power in the house. I bought a 1,500-watt uninterruptible power system. I put new batteries in it. And I'm going to configure that so that that will be in a location that's cool, and all the computers can run on that, including the studio. So instead of having UPSs all over the house, I have one big one that I bought for about $50 on eBay without the batteries, and I bought brand new batteries for it for about $65. So it's like a $500 or $600 or $700 UPS that I'm going to use throughout the whole house. What do you think about that, Kyle?
I think it's a great idea, Vince. It's always good to have backups. You know, the old saying, 2 is 1 and 3 is 2 and 1 is none. You know, so the other thing I would mention to Jay to think about, Jay, buy more power than you think you're going to need. I will tell you this, if you decide for money's problems or money, concerns to buy lead-acid batteries, buy all of them at once. Do not add to lead-acid batteries, because what happens, like if you have, say you bought 4 batteries and you were going to try to get by with 4, and they're like 300 and something a piece. But anyway, you bought 4 of them, and because of money, and you run them for a year or two, what they do is they develop what's called a discharge path. And if you try to add 4 more to it a year or two later, what happens is it puts a heck of a strain on the new group of batteries. So always buy, if you're going to buy lead acid, I'm not sure about those new ones Rich was talking about, but if you're going to buy lead acid, buy all of them save up the money and buy them all at one time and hook them all up together so that they sort of discharge and charge as a group. Because it makes a difference, I can guarantee it. I mean, if you get into a bad situation later on down the road and one of them just goes dead on you and you have to put a new one in there, you got to do what you got to do. But if you could avoid that and have them all the same age, that's what I would do.
Rich?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I also take a voltmeter to my batteries to make sure that they're all in sync, because as Kyle was just alluding to, if you buy X amount of batteries and you see if you can get, some used batteries to throw in your array, or battery bank, and those batteries are subpar, it's going to bring down all of your batteries that you bought brand new. So there's certain things you got to think about. One thing about which we didn't mention, if you buy a solar controller, my recommendation would be to all these things have changed in 11 years that when I went off-grid. And I have a 45-amp solar controller. I would get a 60-amp solar controller, because the bigger your solar controller, the more panels you can add to your array. So I am maxed out right now. So that's something to think about, because you guys were mentioning that you should always have more power than less. But keep in mind, I'm going to be a little redundant here. The bigger your battery bank, if you live in a state like Montana that has a lot of clouds in the winter, you have to fill up that battery bank, especially if it's lead acid, at least every 7 to 8 days. The smaller the system, the easier it is to fill up.
And when you say fill it up, you're talking about charge it. Not water,
Correct.
not
Correct.
still water, but electrically charge to full capacity the battery bank.
Correct.
Kyle, any quick comments?
Nope, I just, just figure think seriously about what you're willing to do without, and consider it before you buy your system.
Yeah, like the electric dryer, the electric stove, the electric hot water heater.
Yep.
Those are all, take them off the list, because you can't do it. Not economically. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.